Welcome to the Housing Digital Micro Conference on revolutionising tenant repayment agreements in social housing, sponsored by Voicescape. In this micro conference, we will explore the complex issue of managing tenant repayment agreements. Social landlords across the sector are sharing the challenges they face with informal, high-risk repayment agreements, leading to significant unrecovered debt. A range of industry experts will share best practice on how to reduce break rates, minimize arrears, and improve financial outcomes for both housing providers and their tenants. We have three keynote speakers today. Our first keynote, I'd like to welcome the sector lead at Voicescape, Steve Lawrence. Steve, you are free to share your screen.
Morning, Joe. Thanks for that. So yeah, we've got an exciting webinar today around repayment agreements and revolutionising these to support landlords. We've got a couple of speakers on the call today. Myself, Steve Lawrence, Sector Lead Social Housing at Voicescape, will be talking about the sector challenge with agreements. We've got Steve Johnson, a behavioural science expert, talking about some of the research and industry insights into these projects. And also Shirley from Onward Homes will be giving her experience something new and exciting in the sector. So just to introduce the sector challenge, I think just to kind of set the scene for Agreements Manager, a brand new solution around this challenge. What I do is just sort of look at the foundation. So at our foundation, we have a collection solution, automation around driving efficiencies, promoting self-service. We can then combine that with AI to help tailor interventions to our customers. And our Caseload Manager solution treats customers as individuals. It looks at their unique payment patterns and trends and can understand when we need to support them and prioritize that by risk as well. So we're excited today to continue our next step in our AI machine learning journey towards risk-based predictive income analytics by introducing the Agreements Manager solution. So as with every new solution that we bring to the market, we start with an insight project. So for the last 5 years, we've been working with over 30 organizations to do a bit of a deep dive into their agreements, look at that true picture of how agreements are made, managed and monitored, and the challenges that we see. And what we found is around 25 to 50% of a landlord's debt is tied up in agreements. The average duration of these agreements is about 2.4 years, with an average amount of £500 to £700, and the average repayment value is only less than £10 a week. So just to sort of frame the picture there. In theory, agreements are a really powerful tool to secure arrears and maintain tenancies. The reality is that they can actually cause more work. So what we found during this Insight project is over 90% of the agreements that were made were broken before they completed. And they actually broke quite quickly as well. They would break within 3 to 6 months. So if you're looking at an average repayment of less than £10 a week, breaking in 3 to 6 months, you're talking £30 to £60. And there's an average repayment amount that we're putting into agreements of £500 to £700. So there's a huge gap. There's this big blind spot. And that's what we built a system to try and manage. Because the challenge that we saw was these were currently appearing because the systems that we have at the moment, just not being able to manage and monitor agreements in an effective way. So the challenge with poorly managed agreements is that they actually create more work. We tend to get into a cycle of making agreements, then breaking, and then chasing agreements and getting back into the cycle with customers. So what we'll do is look at that cycle of things, and it's just not really a uniformed approach to agreements. There's not even a uniform naming structure to them. A lot of organizations refer to them as agreements, repayments, arrangements. So there's lots of different terms and they're not a unified approach. So we wanted to build a system that could really support with that. And what we found, that making, breaking and chasing cycle was also, when we looked at the agreements, there was a real limit to the revenue potential. There was a lot of times very low amounts put in these for very long durations. So we've got a lot of arrears there that we're not really pursuing, and it's increasing the risk of former tenancy arrears as well, which are very challenging to collect. There's a real lack of visibility around agreements. Some people can't even see their agreements. They can't see them in one place, or they need to go digging to find each individual agreement. So we don't know how much debt we have wrapped up in agreements, when those agreements are going to end. it's a little bit, we get someone on an agreement and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. They're put in the corner. We think it's okay. We think that money's coming in. But reality might be those agreements are drifting. They're not paying the full amount. They've actually broken and we're not even aware. Or circumstances have changed. We've got people who are on very low repayment agreements, which we could actually maybe up that amount and recover those arrears much quicker and support those customers a lot quicker as well. And what we're hearing anecdotally in the sector is that the use of agreements is likely to increase. So people are already starting to use these more with the sector challenges around the cost of living crisis, the universal credit migration. And we've had recently the change to third-party deductions as well. So these are going to drop quite dramatically to 15%. And they've also been changing the priority index as well. So things like child maintenance are going to sit as a higher priority than rent arrears. So it's going to be even more challenging to collect revenue. So repayments are likely going to be a tool that we start to utilize a lot more. And there's a lot of challenges around agreements, and the current systems that we have just don't quite help. So one of the main challenges around agreements is there just isn't a dedicated system for them. There's not a specialized solution to help handle them. And what this leads to is officers not utilizing those solutions, either not creating agreements, not tracking them properly, or being able to track them properly within their systems, using things like notes in the HMS to try and track them, or separate spreadsheets, because the current systems just don't have even the fields to actually track and log agreements in a logical way where we can actually manage and maintain them. They don't have the ability to manage multiple payment frequencies, so things like weekly charges, 4 weekly charges versus monthly charges. A lot of the times they'll throw off the systems, leading to false positives and false negatives, and also the different frequencies and times that these payments come in as well. So there's quite a lot of complexities around agreements. And if you've not got the system that can capture the true identity of the agreement at the start, it's really hard to actually maintain and manage that. And it can lead to a lot of inaccurate data, false positives, where we've got cases flagged. I'd spend a lot of time with officers reviewing them, spending time manually calculating them, and then realizing they're actually okay, they're just awaiting a payment. Or false negatives, where we think we've got an agreement, we think we've got debt managed and maintained, but the reality of it, it's hidden out the way, and it could be drifting or broken, and we just don't know, and lead to an increase in arrears. So the systems at the moment, they just don't quite offer the flexibility with agreements as well. There's not really an option a lot of time to create a one-off agreement, to be flexible with agreements, have things like breaks or chunks in them. So what we mean by that is the ability to say, to have a conversation with a customer and say, we've got an agreement that might be 6-9 months long. Are they going to pay every week for that 6-9 months? Or can we make it a little bit more human? Can we say, let's give you a break period over Christmas. Let's give you a break period on your kid's birthday as well. And the systems even don't have options to track formal mandated agreements. These are the ones that you just don't really have any deviation on as well. A lack of historical visibility for data-driven decisions and overrides previous data. So what we mean by that is a lot of the time in the systems, you're overriding the last agreement that you've written. So you've got no visibility on what you've done before. So you can lead you into that cycle of making the same decisions again and again and again, and it might not be leading to a positive outcome. So what we want to do is surface those insights there for you as well. And what we see with these challenges is it creates poor data quality, and poor data quality leads to a large blind spot, which can impact resources and collections. So what this shows here, I think, I had the same reaction when I saw it for the first time as well. But this is a typical HMS view from an organization that thought they were pretty good at managing agreements. So you can see as it trends over time, they're looking at about 12% of their agreements fully completing, 52% being maintained, so still in that agreement, still paying, still on track, and only 36 that were broken. When we interrogated the data with a dedicated agreements data analytics solution, we found the reality was very different. In fact, more than double the amount that they thought had actually fully broken, and what they thought was currently being managed and okay and maintained in the background, there was less than a third of them that they thought that were actually on track. And also the amount completed was a lot less well. So this is the data blind spot that we found in the Insight projects that we wanted to highlight to the sector. Put those two graphs side by side, you can really see that data blind spot, the amount that are broken and not being maintained that we think are being maintained. And a lot of the time when we put someone on an agreement, we think that case is okay and it's in the corner, it's out the way, but the reality is it could be drifting or broken, and the arrears are there that we think is wrapped up, we think is coming in, but it's just not quite the case. And you can see how quickly that happens as well. So I appreciate these graphs are quite hard to see on these slides, but you can see within the first 1 to 2 months, that huge spike in the broken agreements that we think are okay, but have drifted off. So what is Agreements Manager? Agreements Manager is a purpose-built solution that hyper-focuses on agreements. We've built a solution that can handle the data that you need to make, manage, and monitor agreements. This allows the management of complex, erratic customer payment patterns, frequencies, and sources. So the differences with your 4-weekly payments, your monthly payments, your tenant payments, your UC payments, and coming in at different times and dates during the month as well. The system will accurately and automatically identify agreements that need officer attention. Essentially, it's like having a team of people reviewing every single case, every single agreement, every day, letting you know which ones have drifted, which have broken, which maybe require a review. We might have people who are making on track, making payments, but they've got a 5-year agreement making really low installment values. Is there anything we can do to shorten that length of agreement for that customer and help them out of arrears sooner and help our arrears position as well? The system will also even identify those that are overpaying and not on agreement. Can we formalize that process and reduce the risk on those customers as well? What Agreements Manager was built to do was to support earlier. If we can support earlier, if we can have accurate agreements and get customers on good manageable agreements, we can avoid the cost of escalation, going to court. And a lot of time, if we do go to court, there's a lot of costs associated to get there and a lot of time. And when we get there, we normally get minimal statutory court mandated agreements, which are about £4.65 a week. So if we intervene earlier, can we get them on a more manageable payment that gets them out of arrears sooner and doesn't let the arrears of the organisation build up as well? The solution will automate engagement as well. So at key times, it will send nudges, reminders, and positive reinforcement messages to keep customers on track with those agreements. And it also formalizes the process as well. So a lot of the time when agreements are made, it's a conversation on the phone with an officer, and there might not even be anything sent to the customer afterwards. So we want to formalize that process, let them know it's an official process, and just get a bit of a structure around that as well, because you can see that's having a really good impact as well. So the benefits of a purpose-built solution removes false positives and negatives and empowers officers to accurately make and manage and monitor agreements. Agreements Manager gives officers the tools to create optimal, lasting agreements. So what we'll do in the solution is we'll give officers the tools that they need. So when you go into Agreements Manager, you'll be able to see recommended agreement installments for customers. It's a bit like a Goldilocks slide to be able to see what's a low value agreement, what's an optimal agreement, and what's a high agreement to reduce the duration. And what this does is it promotes a conversation with customers. It's a bit of an anchoring point. It's a start point to have a conversation, enter a negotiation, and have a shared agreement with that customer about how and when they're going to make these repayments. And if anyone's seen the Holding On to Home recent insight project by Sheffield Hallam University and the University of West Scotland, there's some really good insights there into the research they've done around having a mutually agreed approach. We're not dictating an agreement with the customer, we're working with them, we're being flexible, and that tends to have much higher results for the customer as well. Agreements Manager will give officers the visibility, actually being able to see all your agreements in one place. It will display clear, accurate information. We can see when they've been made, when they've been broken, how many have been made and broken. We can look at the duration that they typically last for, the performance, missed payments. We can provide risk ratings on these agreements and also adherence levels, so you can see how often people are adhering to these agreements and use that to help prioritize which agreements you're reviewing to get the maximum impact out of them as well. The system allows for flexibility, so you'll be able to have your one-off agreements. You'll be able to have conversations with customers about these breaks and chunks. So if it's a 9-month agreement and we want to put a bit of a break in over Christmas or a birthday, you'll be able to do that. So it's part of that Holding On to Homes survey as well, about having conversations, making these agreements human and making them more likely that they'll be able to adhere to them, because we've offered the flexibility around them to support them with that as well. Within the system as well, you've got the full sort of management information there as well. So we can actually see how much is tied up in an agreement, when will this revenue come in, and what is the risk around it as well. So really important if we're looking at things like setting financial targets for the year. If 25 to 50% of our revenue, of our debt, sorry, is tied up in agreements, we might not realistically be able to collect that within that financial year because the majority of that will sit outside of that. So we can give you those insights from management reporting, what's wrapped up, what's under risk, and help sort of set those targets for the teams as well. So in summary, badly managed agreements create work, they drain resources, and they put debt at risk. However, the opposite is also true. So we created Agreements Manager because 25 to 50% of debt sits within agreements. So Agreements Manager will help you recover more arrears more quickly with less effort and a far better tenant experience. And with the right solution, what the question we asked is, what would the impact be on resources and arrears if we increase the average amount of those repayment values? So rather than a £4.65 court mandated or less than £10, if we could get a much more achievable amount there, and we can act early and avoid those escalation costs. If we can then combine that with a longer agreement, so rather than breaking in 3 to 6 months by offering flexibility with the nudges around it as well, if we could extend that period of time and reduce the break rate, if we can do a combination of all three of those, we can get more out of the agreement, they last longer and fewer break. What would the impact of that be? And that was the question that led us to build the Agreements Manager solution. So that's all from me on that. And any questions?
Hi, I'm Mark Cantrell, editor of Housing Digital.
I'm Mark.
Hi, I've got a couple. I mean, one, does this system track all the tenants, or so you could like maybe predict who might be about to fall into arrears, so you can intervene sooner, or does it just focus on those who have already fallen into arrears and have got these agreements going? And secondly, you talk about the data and the insight stuff. Does that include information and insights into why people are breaking these agreements? So, allow some kind of support and intervention to help. Does it help, highlight those issues and provide information on that?
Yeah, brilliant. So two great questions there, Mark. So on the first one, yeah, you can see absolutely all your customers within Agreements Manager. It integrates in with our predictive suite. So a caseload manager would recommend customers for contact based on, even reducing credits, risk of falling into arrears. But yeah, you can see everything within Agreements Manager. It will also highlight cases where customers are even overpaying. So they're not on an agreement, they're overpaying. But actually, can we start to formalize that process? So rather than just a customer informally just doing that off their own back, let's put a bit of a formal process around that. We can wrap that up in our reporting and understanding and the risks around that as well. So yeah, you'll be able to see absolutely everything. It's not just your customers in arrears. You can be proactive around this as well. And the second question in terms of the Insight project, so the team at Sheffield Hallam University, University of West Scotland, have done a lot of research on that. The holding onto homes might be a really good insight into the sort of rationale behind why people break those agreements and why people are falling into arrears. What we're going to do at the end is we've got a link to, we've just released a new white paper, which might be really interesting because it wraps that up with our own Insight project. So I thought if at the end there'll be a link to that, might be really useful. And I don't want to steal Steve Johnson's thunder. He's jumping on next to talk a lot about the behavioural science backing of the project and the insights. So if you've still got some questions after that, Mark, we can go through those at the end if that's okay. Perfect, thank you.
Good stuff. Have we got any more questions for Steve, please?
Oh, hi, Steve. Chloe from Motorhomes, one of the income officers. Does the system incorporate rent increases? So where there's like our annual rent increase, would the system automatically recognise that and, prompt the customer for the new amount in line with the agreement of the previous year?
So you'd be looking at, would the amount of the agreement increase by what we increase the rent by at the end of March?
No. So the agreement stays the same, but with the rent increase, does it recognise the new amount required?
Yes, use the caseload manager solution at Moat, don't you? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So this integrates fully in with that suite. So it would all be wrapped up in that and all be managed for you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, it was just a quick one really, about the agreements. What do you use the agreements for? Are they informal, one-off, court mandated, all or none of the above?
In terms of our side, it's all the above. So the solution will be able to track your court mandated, your informal, your sort of one-offs, all within one system. I think obviously court mandated ones are used quite often. Some organisations from our Insight project didn't tend to use the informal ones as much. And a lot of the reasons behind that is just there was nowhere to really accurately track and monitor it. They were putting people on and then having no visibility. And by the time they saw that customer again, the arrears actually increased when going on an agreement. So it would be really interesting to hear from the room in terms of what people are doing around agreements at the moment.
All that's left is a brief summary of each of our keynotes. We first obviously heard from Steve, who is the sector lead at Voicescape. Steve summarised the sector challenges associated with repayment agreements from extensive sector research. 90% of agreements fail, which is astounding. 90% of agreements fail within 3 to 6 months. Up to 50% of arrears are tied up in them. There seems to be a constant cycle of making, breaking, and chasing. And Steve introduced the solution to this, which is, of course, the agreements manager. We then heard from our independent behavioural insights advisor, Stephen Johnson. Stephen presented how agreements manager is behavioural science backed, looking at what factors impact agreement success, including social factors that are a big part of the problem. As per the quote, there is too much life happening out there for residents. Stephen went on to explain the golden moments of communication and to get this right to keep agreements on track to maintain sustainable tenancies for the future. And then we finally heard briefly from Shirley McFarlane, who is the income management team leader at Onward Homes. Shirley presented Onward's historical battle with agreements and how it has always been a priority for them to solve. One case study is where a resident was paying £4.50 a week on a 4K debt, which would take decades to repay. Shirley then shared why Onward are going on a journey with Agreements Manager, some of the reasons why they like the system, but advised that the power of gratitude cannot be ignored ever. Thank you to everyone who attended today's micro conference. We are wrapping up slightly early today. Just a reminder to all attendees, if you haven't already registered on Housing Digital, please do so. It's free. It means you can access content like this, the recordings of all our previous micro conferences. You can interact on our secure social wall. You can advertise jobs free of charge on Housing Digital as a logged in member. I will share the link now, which no, that's not the link. But if you head on to housingdigital.co.uk/register, like I say, it is free to register for an account there. Other than that, we hope to see you at a future micro conference. Please join me in saying a big thank you to our keynote speakers, and we hope to see you again soon.